time. We are live. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. To the thousands watching live on Facebook and YouTube, you are not nearly as cool as the virtual studio audience that we have on Zoom. So do come and join us. It's where the magic happens. And without further ado, let's get some things underway. Let's have a look, first of all, at the parasha. This week's parasha is Shmot. We are into the second book of the Torah. We just finished Sefer Bereshis, the book of Genesis, last week. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Please put that down, Danielle. Thank you. And we are now into the second of the 5 books of Moses, as they say in the north. The book of Shemot, Parashat Shemot. So let's just put things into perspective a little bit. The book of Bereshit, as I mentioned before, covers over 2,000 years of Jewish history. And from the book of Shemot till the end of the Torah, we're only going to cover about 50 years of Jewish history. So that's important to consider, that from here on in, there's very little time that's actually covered in the other 4 books of the Torah. But this week, we are going to start learning about the life of Moses. We cover his life from birth, when he's put into a basket and floated down the river Nile, taken in by the daughter of Pharaoh, raised in the palace, right up to the exciting moment where he comes face to face with Pharaoh as the leader of the Jewish people to request our freedom. And we probably know about all the bits in between. Pharaoh ordering the death of all the Jewish males, which is what leads to Moses being put into the basket and ending up living under Pharaoh's nose. By the way, one of the reasons why he wanted all the babies drowned is because his astrologers said that the salvation of the Jewish people will come through water. And so to counteract that, he thought, well, let's try and kill all of the potential Jewish saviors by throwing them into the water. And it was through the water that Moses was saved. And that's just one interesting little connection over there. So what else do we have? We have the episode with the burning bush, Hashem telling Moses that he's going to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. We have a whole section where Moses is saying that he's really not sure that he can really be the leader, but in the end Hashem, sets it up that he is going to be the one who leads the Jewish people, and reassures him. And so that's when he goes back to Mitzrayim. That's when he goes back to Egypt, and encounters Pharaoh. And that's when things get a bit harder for the Jewish people. And then it sets us up for the next couple of parashas, which is going to be the 10 plagues. So that's this week's parasha in a bit of a nutshell. One of my favorite messages, one of my favorite Divrei Torah from Chief Rabbi Mervis, and I've probably said this before, but it's such an important idea when we consider that the book of Shemot means names, so the essence of the book is about names. The essence of this week's parasha is about names, and yet when we are introduced to Moses being born, the way that the Torah sets it up is it says, Vayelech ish mibeit Levi, vayikach et bat Levi. That a man from the house of Levi went and took as for a wife one of the daughters of Levi. Vatahar ha'isha vateled ben. And the woman conceived and gave birth to a son. Vateret oto ki tovhu v'titzbenenu shlosha yirachim. And she saw that he was good and she hid him for 3 months. By the way, why did she hide him for 3 months? He was 3 months premature. And so the Egyptians wouldn't have known that she was giving birth. And so she had that little bit of leeway to be able to store him. But in any event, the verse is deliberately anonymous. We know who Moses' mother is. We know who Moses' father is. And yet the Torah is deliberately keeping them anonymous. And Chief Rabbi Mervis says that the reason for this is that you don't become great because of who your parents are, or because of your stock, or because of your yichus. You don't have to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth to become great. You become great on account of your own efforts, on account of your own input, on account of your own talents that you put to use. That is the message, that anybody can become great. It's not about being born with a silver spoon. So Moses is deliberately kept separate from his lineage. There we go. Thank you. Is deliberately kept separate from his lineage so that we don't think that, oh yeah, well of course Moshe was Moshe, because look who his parents were. They were Amram and Yocheved. They were leaders of the Jewish people. The Torah deliberately keeps it anonymous so that we can understand that everybody is given the opportunity for greatness in their own way and on their own level and in their own pace. So there you go, Donielle. You can become great, not because your father is awesome, not because your mother is amazing, but on account of your own. There we go. At least Rita's laughing. Okay, any questions on Shemot before we go into Pirkei Avot? Just a couple of coughs. All right, so let's get that screen shared. Here we go with chapter 4, Mishnah 6. Let's get it up on here as well for all those too scared to come and join us on Zoom. There we go. All right. Everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okie dokie. So on the screen it's Mishnah 5, but in other places it's Mishnah 6. Can you please ask Mummy to help you just because Daddy is teaching? She's gone somewhere? Please excuse me, we are having some homeschooling issues.
Who's taking part in the quiz this evening at 8 o'clock?
8:30, Gary, and yes, of course, we're in the quiz this evening.
Is it 8:30? Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome. Yeah, great quiz. Quiz of the year, big fat quiz of the year. Tonight at 8:30. Although if you haven't signed up yet, then you'll want to be on before 8:15 to sign up. Okie dokie. I've got my place. Yeah, big quiz tonight. All right, here we go, guys. Mishnah 6, or on the screen, Mishnah 5. So, so here we go. Anyone want to read the English for us?
Yeah, well, I'll have a go.
If you can take us.
Rabbi Ishmael, his son, said, "He who learns in order to teach, it is granted to him to study and to teach. He who learns in order to practice, it is granted to him to learn and to teach and to practice."
Thank you very much. If we can stop there, let's stop there. Let's start first with the lesson of Rabbi Ishmael, who is the son of.
Bible says Rabbi Yosef.
Pardon me?
Bible says Rabbi Ishmael by Rabbi Yosef on there.
Ah, thank you. Yes, there is a dispute as to who exactly is talking.
Because what does this mean? Rabbi Ishmael, his son?
Yes, so...
Whose son?
So some people, I think, say that he is Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka's son, who we saw last week. And others, as you say, and actually the book that I have here as well, is calls him Rabbi Ishmael bar Rabbi Yossi. So you're right. So Rabbi Ishmael, he says, Halomed Torah al manas lelamed, a person who learns Torah in order to teach, maspikin biyado lilmod lamed, he will be able to teach, to learn and to teach. But if you learn in order to practice, in order to do, al manat la'asot, maspikin biyado lilmod ulelamed lishmor v'la'asot. If you recognize those words, it's from the paragraph just before the Shema at Shacharis. And it's saying that a person who is learning in order to practice will be given the ability to learn and to teach and to guard, to protect the Torah and la'asot, and to practice. So you get all of those benefits for the price of one. So does anybody have any questions or any comments before we start?
Presumably that's very profound because it's really saying the highest reason for learning, for studying, is to practice. And then if you can do that, you're doing it for the right reason and you can do everything else.
Very good. Yeah. By the way, I just want to point out that the words that it lifts from. Okay. Boy, are you glad that we're live, Donia. Okay, so the prayer that we say in the morning is Avinu Av Harachaman, our Father, the merciful Father, Rachem Aleinu, have mercy upon us, V'tein B'libeinu, put into our hearts, Lahavinu Lahaskil, to understand and to comprehend, Lishmoa, to listen, Lilmod L'lamed, to learn and to teach, Lishmor V'lasos, to protect and to do, to practice, Ulakayim es kol divrei Talmud Torasecha b'ahava, and to fulfill all the words of your teaching ba'ahava, in love. And I thought that was worth sharing because ultimately the whole point of everything that we're doing is to be able to do it with love and to serve Hashem out of love. Just one moment, guys. I can't do this. Please stop doing this until after lunch and lunch. Okay? Both of you, please go out of the room because you're disturbing everybody's ability to learn. Okay? I will take this. Thank you very much. Both of you, please go out of the room and go and play until I finish. I can't do it. Darcy, I'm really sorry. I can't do this now. I'm in the middle of a class. You'll have to tell me after, Angel. Okay? Everyone can hear you. Everyone is listening to you. I'm really sorry. Please stop. I understand. He will be in trouble after lunch and learn. Everyone can hear that. Okay? Enough, please. Everybody out.
Well done.
Boy,
It gets worse, Rabbi, not better.
Practice. Good practice.
Okay, guys. So that's what we're ultimately getting to. We say this every single day in our tefillah before we say Shema. That we want to be able to learn and to practice and to do all of these things, but we want to do it ba'ahava. It has to mean something to us. It has to be something that we're passionate about. Illuminate our eyes with your Torah, with your wisdom. Have our hearts cleave through your mitzvot. And how would I translate the Yached? Oh, come on, I need a good word for the Yached. Why is no one racing ahead of me here? A good word for the Yached, says Rabbi Sachs. Unite our hearts to love and fear your name so that we may never be ashamed. So there we go. That's what we pray for every single day. So I just thought that was worth pointing out. Now.
So, Rabbi, so that's the prayer before we gather our sitters when we're saying
that's right.
Shema. Does the prayer come from Pirkei Avot?
Well, it could be that they encapsulated those words from the Mishnah. That's highly possible. These words will have been floating around all at the same time. I don't know if they'll have taken it from the Mishnah or the Mishnah will have taken it from the Siddur. It's a good question, but either way, these are words and concepts that will have been floating around there to be drawn upon for sure. So yeah. Okay.
The Mishnah surely was before the prayer was formulated, so I would think the Mishnah came first.
Well, I don't know when this particular prayer was formulated. I don't have a way of looking that up.
I mean, in the Mishnah we're told about the Shema and the Amidah, but we're not told about the well, we are to some extent, yeah, could be.
I'm not sure exactly when this particular
Prayer was formulated.
yeah. I can see if it's in the art scroll.
Rabbi, I
No, it doesn't
also
come.
have a question. While
Yeah.
I was looking, he said, he who learns in order to teach. Does everyone who learns have to teach?
Ah, so that's a very, very good question. What do people think?
Well, we're told if you know Aleph base, teach Aleph base. Whatever you know, if it's right, teach it. So I suppose we have an obligation to teach our children, certainly.
Very good.
Yes.
But if you're not a capable teacher, it's best to stay away from trying to teach.
You know, the interesting thing is when maybe we can think about it in the following way. When we are excited about something, when we are when something is important to us, and it's an important part of our identity, and we want it to be a staple part of our children's identity, then we will have no other option. Our souls won't rest until we are being, able to transmit and share the same pearls that we have been treated to. We will want nothing more than to share it with everybody around us. When we are excited about something, we want everyone to hear. We want to stand on the rooftops and scream all these things. So, that's what we're saying when we want to do these things. But ahava as well, it all ties in, it all connects, doesn't it? When you are passionate about something, when something is important to you, you want to be able to share that and you want to be able to teach that. So, if we're learning correctly, I guess the desire to teach is almost an immediate byproduct of that. Would you agree?
I think it depends also what you mean by teach too. There's formal teaching.
Right.
But I was more involved and learned more from, I won't mention what rabbi, but a particular rabbi who came to Kingston. And because of his whole demeanour and attitude and love, changed my attitude, not from teaching, because he was far above any level he would have taught, but he did teach, but not me.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned more from him by his behaviour and his moral compass and the way he behaved than I did. And it changed my life and my wife's life, but purely because the way he and his wife behaved. So he taught us by doing what he did in such a way as it influenced us.
I mean, that's a beautiful insight as well. Then, if we learn something which transforms the way that we interact with others, then whatever we're doing, we rub off on other people.
I will mention, it was Rabbi Lieberman and his wife Peggy. I mean, they were such amazing people that we changed our whole life. Not because they purposely had an effect on us, we just it does have an effect on us.
Mm-hmm. By osmosis.
So they taught us by behaving in a certain way, by the love and the affection and everything. I can't explain it. But
which Rabbi Lieberman?
changed my life.
Which Rabbi Lieberman?
Rabbi Lieberman, who's now from Edgware.
Edgware Hadass.
Yeah, Edgware Hadass.
Rabbi Lieberman, if you're watching, Martin Moss sends his love.
I've told him, he knows many times. Now, I love the man without beyond recognition.
Is that Zvi Lieberman?
Zvi, yeah.
So I knew him when I worked at the US. Yeah.
He came to King. We were the first rabbi, the shul that he came to as a rabbi from Kingston.
There we go. It's all because of you.
And his wife, Faggy, and his children. I mean, everybody about that family is unbelievable. And President Rabbonim too, Rabbi Nick.
If I can just go back to this thing about practice, I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure the significance of practice, because the more you practice, surely the less you can learn.
What?
Right, you learn.
If
The more you practice, the less you learn.
How does the practice work out?
As you practice, you learn.
I don't understand that. The
No.
more you practice, the more you learn, surely.
Yeah, but you're learning on the one hand, and then you're practicing. You're practicing what exactly?
I guess the things that you learn. You learn.
And what use you're making of the word practice? It's a funny word because you can practice something you don't know till you do know it. But in this instance, it means carrying out the rules and the regulations and what you have learned. The doctor doesn't actually practice on you, I hope. I hope he already knows.
I think from what the way that I've understood it is as follows. That there's two things here. There's learning just because it's important to learn. That's one thing. You might just be learning for learning's sake. So that's not ideal. And we've seen in a few places in Pirkei Avot where we emphasize that it's not just enough to learn, to study, but it's about spreading that wisdom and spreading that knowledge and teaching others and helping others with our learning. So that's one thing. But it seems that even there, it might not be enough. It's a very kind of superficial learning. If we just kind of, I guess the way that I was picturing it is, you might have a Jewish studies teacher who goes through all of the teacher training courses, is capable of teaching whatever it might be, Chumash, GCSE curriculum, primary school curriculum, whatever it might be, but it doesn't really rub off and it doesn't penetrate. You're learning the material so that you can then pass on the material, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So if you're doing that, it's still nice, it's still very worthwhile. And the Mishnah says, so a person who learns Torah with the intention of teaching, so they'll be able to learn and they'll be able to teach. But if you are learning these things and you want it to be absorbed, you want it to go somewhere, you want it to penetrate the heart, even a little bit, or even if it's down the line, whatever it is, but your attitude to Torah study is that it's not just an academic pursuit, it's not just teacher training that I need to go through, but that actually you recognize that it's a part of your life and it's a part of your essence and it's a part of your identity, then it seems to me it's almost being like divinely assured that maspikin biyado, which it says in the Hebrew there, is saying that it's that you will be given the means to learn and to study and to protect it and to do it. The world will be opened up to you if you open up your world to it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So it's more about depth and more about depth and see what I was thinking of.
I think it's about appreciating that it's more and it's deeper than just an academic pursuit, just another GCSE subject.
I
whatever it is.
think what you see in all walks of life, and we've had it recently with our members of parliament who try to bring in laws and teach us how to behave, but don't behave that way themselves.
Yeah.
And that you can do more damage as a teacher in this sort of thing, in religious and philosophical work, by trying to teach it but behaving in the wrong way. It doesn't work. The students will look and say, well, you say one thing and do another.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
it
so
completely
important
delegitimizes
the philosophy and religion, to teach it and to believe it and to practice it, to actually show that this is the way that is good.
There's a famous saying, Devarim hayotzim min halev nichnasim el halev. The words and the values that emanate from your heart, they have the capacity to enter someone else's heart. If you are teaching because you have to teach, if you are sharing because you have to share, but it doesn't, it's not sitting anywhere with you. It's not coming from your heart. It's coming from a textbook. It's coming from a rule book, whatever it might be. It's coming because that's what, as Martin was alluding to with the government, that, it's what's expected of you. It's your job, right? So anything that's your job and you don't feel passionate about it, or even as a parent, if the things that we try and pass on to our children, if they don't mean anything to us, and we're just saying, do as I say, don't do as I do, as Martin was alluding to, it doesn't really go anywhere, and it doesn't really penetrate because it's so superficial and it's so hollow. The things that really transmit and the things that really are paid attention to are the things that the listener or the recipient are feeling the passion and feeling the enthusiasm that comes from the person who's speaking. So that applies to all walks of life, to every single type of relationship. It's as relevant now as it was then, really. Go on, Rita.
Not everybody can be a good teacher. I mean, my sister was a teacher, and my sister used to tell me, how do you have so much patience, right? So not everybody can be a good teacher. Charisma, whatever you call it.
Maybe not professionally, but as he was saying it before, was it Martin as well? That when we lead by example, so we are all people of influence. We might not have far-reaching influence. We might not be in front of a class, but we have influence on anybody that we come into contact with. So when you lead by example in your life, it has an impact on people, and that is teaching as well. It's not.
That's what I think the second part is all about. Not only you teach by example. The way you behave is so important, and the way somebody behaves can put people off or can actually grab people towards.
That's right. One last thing on this part of the Mishnah before we go on to the second part of the Mishnah. Is that one thing that emerges from these words is that there's a concept of teaching even when you have nothing to gain. And the example that I was reading about was Moses, who had nothing to gain by teaching and by leading the Jewish people. He was told that he would not be entering the land of Israel. And yet, even though all of the halachas then that he was teaching, all of the laws that he was teaching didn't apply to him, he was not going to be able to do them because there were laws that only apply in Eretz Israel, and he was teaching the entire Jewish nation. And so even though these things...
He didn't know that to the end of his life.
Yeah, I was just going to say he didn't know that till the end of his life. Yeah.
It wasn't the very end of his life. It wasn't the very end of his life. So...
Pretty close.
Pretty okay, well nonetheless, he didn't just throw it all in the bin and didn't just say like, all right, well I've got nothing more to do with these people now. He carried on teaching, and the last few days of his life, the book of Devarim is all about his final messages, his final lessons to the Jewish people. It was important for him that they should receive that wisdom and that they should know what to do when they go into the land of Israel, even though he himself would not be going in. So that's where the concept of teaching, even if you personally might not necessarily have anything to gain from it, there is still precedent for someone in the Torah who did it. Hello, David. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Lovely to hear you.
Thank you.
Can't see you, David.
Can't see you.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He hasn't put his makeup on. That's why. There we go.
Welcome back.
The reunion. A warm welcome. The group is
Been away,
complete.
David? You've been away?
No?
Oh,
No. I don't think you can at the moment.
No, I thought maybe you'd been in Israel or somewhere for 6 months or 9 months.
I'd love to.
There's Leon staying there. He's not coming back. Not for the moment.
Lucky for him. So let's have a look then at the final part of this Mishnah on the screen, or Mishnah 7 if you're in a book that divides it up like that. And let's see the final part. Who wants to read the next part from Rabbi Tzadok?
Yeah. The translation's a bit peculiar. Rabbi Zadok said, "Do not make them a crown for self-exaltation, nor a spade with which to dig." Never heard it translated like that. So too, Hillel used to say, I've always translated it as, "Do not separate yourself from the community."
Ah, well, this is interesting. That is interesting. 1 second. Yeah, okay. All right. Allow me to step in over here, please.
Yes, Rabbi.
We're going to have a hard time with our screen today. I mean, Safaria is an amazing resource, but let me walk us through this part then. Okay, it's not going to help for us to do it like this. Okay, so Rabbi Tzadok Omer, in my version.
Yeah.
I'll do it in the Hebrew and I'll do it in the English. Al tifrosh min hatzibor means do not separate yourself from the community.
Yeah,
Now that is not on the screen because they, I guess, are going with the opinion that says that it's a mistake that this should appear in the Mishnah. The reason why people think it's a mistake is because the words Al tifrosh min hatzibor, do not separate yourself from the community, appears very, very recently. Some of you may remember this. It appeared in chapter 2, Mishnah 5, the words of Hillel. Hillel also taught us Al tifrosh min hatzibor, to not separate from the community. So there are some who say, well, okay, Rabbi Tzadok also, living at the end of the second Beis Hamikdash, saw how there were many groups that were splintering away, and so for him it was also a very important message, and so he repeated it. And others say that actually it shouldn't be here at all. So I guess Safaria, the resource that we use online, is siding with the opinion that these words shouldn't be here at all, as they seem to be doing with the next phrase. But
He puts it there in Hebrew, but doesn't put it there in English.
It's not. It's not in the Hebrew. It's not in the Hebrew. No, that's right. Yes, Rita.
Can you explain the English? First of all, I need to understand it.
Of what? Of not separating from the community.
What does it mean? Do not make them a crown for
So Rita, we're getting there. The Mishnah on the screen is not going to help us very much, and it also skips out phrases that appear in other editions. So I'm just going to run through the stuff that appears in the other editions, and then we'll come to the things on the screen. Okay?
Yeah.
So the first thing that Rabbi Tzadok says in some versions is a repetition of not separating from the Jewish community. And we've spoken about it before, so we won't go into much depth on it today, but it would seem that even for Rabbi Tzadok, that was a concern. There's a danger to Jewish society when people break off and try and do their own thing. Then there's another phrase which doesn't appear on the screen, which is Va'al tas atzmacha ka'orchei hadayanim, to not act as a lawyer, which is a repetition of chapter 1, Mishnah 8. And so again, there's an opinion that says that it shouldn't be in this Mishnah. In our books, though, in some editions, it is here. And one of the reasons why they say it gets repeated is whereas in chapter 1 it was addressed at judges, in this Mishnah, Rabbi Tzadok is aiming these words at people who break away. And they're saying, if you're going to break away and do the wrong thing, don't start trying to get all clever and creative to justify your reasons. It's not an appropriate thing to be doing. So he's saying, don't start behaving like lawyers do and coming up with all these creative justifications for bad behavior. He's saying that you shouldn't be breaking away, and it's a dangerous thing to do. That doesn't appear on the screen. The words that appear on the screen are as follows. Va'al ta'aseha atara lehitgadel ba. Okay, that's number 1. well, the words are slightly different on the screen, but what it's saying is as follows. Don't use the Torah as a crown for self-glorification.
Oh, right. Okay. That
Okay?
understands.
So that's there we go. So that's where we're trying to get to with these words. So Rabbi Tzadok is cautioning that people should not use the Torah, to not study the Torah because you want to get honor, because you want to get glory, because you want to get kavod. So that seems to be the first thing that he's saying. The next thing that he's saying is v'lo kardom lachpor bahem, to not use the Torah as a spade with which to dig, which we'll come back to again in a second. And the next thing is, it says, v'kach haya Hillel omer, and this is what. Can we please talk about this after lunch and learn, children? Please. Can we not get her upset now? Can we please talk about this after? Thank you. Do you want to cuddle? No. Yeah. Can we talk about this in 20 minutes, okay? Mary, can you please sort out the situation?
This is really testing, isn't it?
Can you go and deal with this now, please, Mary?
Yes, that's the car.
Okay.
You're not letting me with the
Close the door, please, Danielle. Danielle, please can you close the door? Whichever side you're on, just please close the door. Thank you. And then, B'kach haya Hillel omer. And this is what Hillel says. Now these words are also a repetition. These are repeated, where did I write it? In chapter 1, Mishnah 13, where he said, Hillel used to say, he that uses the Torah as a crown in order to glorify himself for his own self-gratification, for his own purposes, they shall perish or fade away. Thus you have learned, anyone who derives worldly benefit from the words of the Torah removes his life from the world. So let's just try and go through this in the English, and let's try and explain some of the things that we are seeing over here, okay? And then hopefully we'll understand what this mission is really trying to say. So, we're going to focus now on the words that we see on the screen rather than those first two phrases. He says, Rabbi Tzadok, do not make the Torah a crown for self-gratification. There has to be a certain level of, do we call it altruism? I'm not sure if that's the right word. But we don't learn Torah, and we don't teach Torah, and we don't get rabbinic ordination so that everybody can say, ooh, hello, Rabbi, I must give you so much respect. We don't, that's not why we should learn Torah. That's not why we should study Torah. It's not so that others can think that you're amazing, and that they can think that you're so wise, and that there's something in it for you. Rabbi Tzadok is saying that we should be a bit more, I don't think altruistic is the right word, but I can't think of the word.
Modest.
Okay, good. That's right. So it's not supposed to be about us. We don't learn Torah because, and we don't get smicha and get called rabbi, so that everyone walks around and gives you honor and gives you respect and bumps you up to the front of the queue because you're the local Jewish celebrity. That's not what we're supposed to be exploiting Torah for. And the other example that it gives, the other analogy is, V'lo kardom lachpor bahem. We shouldn't be using it as a kardom is a spade, with which to dig. So this is actually saying that the Torah is not just supposed to be your workman's tool with which to earn your crust. Darcy, can you go and close that? It's not supposed to be your way of making money. So there you go, rabbis. Rabbi Nick. don't use the Torah as your source of employment and your source of income. Oh, you've heard it here first in the Mishnah. So that's interesting, isn't it? No? The Mishnah's telling us. Yeah, go on, Josephine.
A lot of the rabbis had professions besides they taught as a side thing. They actually earned their living elsewhere and taught in those days.
Very good. It's only a very recent innovation, really, that people earn money from the fact that they teach Torah or the fact that they are community rabbis. It's only a very recent thing. The Rambam, hundreds of years ago, was very, very critical of people that would earn money from Torah by teaching Torah. He was very, very heavily against it. He himself was a physician. He had a side income. He didn't earn money from his job as a spreader of Torah. And he was very cautious. I mean, the wording, granted it's in English, but the quote that I found, the great men of the Talmud did not allow themselves to accept payment for Torah study. And they thought that by doing so, they would create in the eyes of the masses a chilul Hashem, that people would think that learning Torah is a job like any other means of employment by which people earn their livelihood, and thus Torah study would be degraded in the eyes of the masses. And therefore, one who does engage in this practice insults the word of God. And that is why, historically, there was actually systems in place, which we learned from two of the tribes, from Yisachar and Zevulun, where Yisachar was the scholar who would spend the time learning, or at least the tribe of Yisachar were those who would go and study, and the tribe of Zevulun were the businessmen who would support Yisachar in their study. This was an arrangement that existed for many, many, many years. That Yisachar would be the equivalent of what we call now the kollel system, and they would be supported by their cousins by providing the financial security in order that they should be able to sit and learn. So historically, there was never this thing of people earning money and making their primary source of livelihood through teaching Torah and spreading Torah. It's a very recent innovation. It was around, I think, the 14th century when it just became too economically and socially pressurizing to be able to sustain yourself in this way. And
I personally can't. I mean, first of all, didn't Rambam have a very wealthy brother who supported him? But on top of that, I can't see the difference between somebody making a living out of teaching and somebody who sits and teaches and lets somebody else to support them. They're also making their living out of studying. But they're not getting it straight from the person who they're teaching is irrelevant to my mind. It's so different.
To your mind. Well, allow me to say...
I mean, if you sit and study all day, which is wonderful, if that's the way you think you should be, but somebody else supports you, then you're making your living, which is the way you eat and sleep, out of study.
So the arrangement is, between Yisachar and Zevulun, the arrangement would have been that the people who are supporting financially are receiving a huge chunk of that reward. It's in the merit of the fact that they would have been supporting these scholars that they are able to sit and learn. So it's not a system that only benefits the scholars, it's a system that spiritually benefits the supporters as well. Because there's a huge amount of merit spiritually for people who support Torah study, Torah institutions, Torah education. There's a huge amount of spiritual reward for these people.
So, are you talking about the yeshivas now? or the yeshivas?
Well, I'm starting historically, and then we can draw whichever comparisons we want to the modern systems. But the concept of being supported, which was just as beneficial to the supporters as it was for those who were able to study, is different than charging a fee for the services that you provide. And the services that you're providing ultimately are just Torah, really. That's what you're providing. So what right do you have to go and profit from the Torah? So that's why historically it was always very, very frowned upon that people should accept a salary. A salary is very different from financial support, because the financial support is an act of benevolence, which was also of benefit to the supporters. But a salary is basically saying, I refuse to do my work unless you pay me to do it, which the Rambam was very critical of, and historically was always very frowned upon.
Someone couldn't study all day long unless somebody supported them. So if they stopped supporting them, they'd have to go out and work. Surely. I can't see it different myself.
Lovely. A proper household.
A proper, exactly. We're all in this together, right? So yes. So we were saying, yes. So historically, just one moment, Joe. So historically, rabbis would have other jobs as well, by the way, and that's also something to bear in mind. Rabbis would have other jobs. They would have side income, and so they wouldn't need to be relying on a salary for the Torah that they were teaching. And also historically, the community would give honor to their rabbis more than they do now. And for people that had these side income streams, whether they were tradesmen, whether they were craftsmen, whatever it was that they did to earn a crust, the shops and the trades that they operated would be supported by everybody in the community. The Chafetz Chaim famously used to have a grocery shop, which he would open up for a few hours a day, and everybody would flock to his shop. And he found that people would come and spend loads of money in his shop, and other businesses were suffering. So he reduced the number of hours that he was open for. But then he found that people would purposely wait for that small window of time, and they would all rush to his store to be able to buy what they needed. And again, it was having a knock-on effect to the other people trading in the area. So eventually it got to the point where he just closed his business so as not to damage other people's business. But the point is that historically, when a rabbi was relying on these other income streams, the community would support them and would purposely make sure that those businesses were able to thrive, so that he wouldn't have the financial concerns, and would therefore be able to lead the community, teach the community, whatever it might be. So historically, they wouldn't have earned a salary from their community work, but they would have been earning their salary from side things. Rita, can we go to Jo first if she's there?
I'm going to be controversial here.
Yeah.
How do you explain then a yeshiva bucher?
Yeah.
In the yeshiva maybe 4 or 5 years, some of them do a lot of years.
Yeah.
And not to go to the Israeli army.
Sorry, and they don't go to the Israeli army?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it's not right. The guy is becoming a soldier to protect the country, and the other guy just sits there and this is controversial, really. I mean, this is a thing we can discuss all day.
Yeah, we don't shy away from controversy, but I'm not necessarily saying that I have an amazing answer for you either.
About the learning, what does that fit in with what we just said.
Yeah.
I mean, he's doing the learning, he's doing a good thing, he doesn't charge, he's probably supported by God knows how many people, you know, his parents, maybe some other people. He does what he does, learning Torah, and then at the other end, the other guy, poor guy, has to go to Gaza and you know, risk his life.
So yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that on one leg, but Stanley's got his hand up, so maybe get me out of this one, Stanley. You're muted though. You're going to need to unmute yourself there, Stanley. Have you got the way of doing that? Have you got access to the button? Because we can't hear you, Stanley. I can't take control to be able to turn your microphone on. Are you able to see the button in the bottom left there? It looks like a microphone. If you press that, then we'll be able to hear you. Is there a button there that looks like a microphone?
You're muted, Stanley.
Is there a question coming up on your screen that you can say yes to?
You're muted, Stanley. We can't hear you. I think Josephine wanted to say something.
Well, no, my grandson just not. Someone was at the bell. It was my grandson just to say hi, and I don't know if you passed discussing that. I was just going to say, in my book, it says that Joseph Caro, who was the author of Shulchan, disagreed with Moses, and he thought rabbis should be paid.
Mm-hmm. I agree with him. I agree with him. I also think rabbis should be paid.
Surely, what we do today, and
certainly
much more than when I was a child, we all contribute to the community so our rabbis can live a reasonable life. Most of you could earn a lot more if you're into another profession. Dedicate your life to us, and in return we pay what we now call a membership fee, which is no different to what it is supporting someone sitting in Europe.
So in essence, you're right, and this is what I was saying, that as history developed, certainly in Christian Europe, it just wasn't possible for the system to sustain itself. So it did require a different way of doing things. Interestingly, from what I was reading, Sephardic rabbis, right up until the 20th century, managed to maintain that structure though. And they would either have side employment, or they would have, you know, supporters and people who gave that, you know, made sure that their rabbis were taken care of instead of having to take a salary for the work that they were doing. And I think what lies at the heart of it is an appreciation of the important role that a Rav plays, as Martin's alluding to, giving their life to the community, and an appreciation of the importance of Torah study and Torah teaching. And the oh, 1 second, Stanley's unmuted.
Yeah.
You done it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Right. It was an aside from the Seder, actually. Something's actually happening to me. The Seder, or the book, is Shemaus, which means Exodus, correct?
Well, the word Shemot doesn't, but we call it the Book of Exodus. Yeah.
The Book of Exodus, many years ago, later on, the Israelis were shipped in a ship to various countries and were refused entry. I think they were refused entry in America, in England. I think they had to go. But what occurs to me is that the ship that they sailed on was called Exodus, and they were written. There's a song written called Exodus, the Exodus song. And I am about to sing this song on one of my musical trips.
Oh wow!
It's and it starts, "This land is mine." I don't know if you know it.
From the film Exodus.
On the film,
It's the
"This land is mine." And
Okay,
this
Stanley, you want the song?
Oh, excuse me. Can I finish? I'm not gonna sing the song, but I'm about to start singing this song, and it occurred to me as an aside when you brought in the word Shemaus. That's, as I said, it is an aside.
Aha.
Thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate the segue. David, were you going to say something before?
I'm going to go.
We've got a couple of minutes. Yeah, oh, because it's 1 o'clock already. Well, good luck with your song.
Where is it, Stanley? Where will you be singing?
I'll be singing to various people in the community
Right.
on my telephone singing,
Oh,
Ah.
I see. Very
which has been running for.
Klinger the singer.
It's delightful to
Yeah.
hear. It's wonderful to hear that you're still doing it.
Oh yeah, still doing it. But this is part of a new set, the Exodus song, and it occurred as you
Wish
mentioned.
you
Shemaus.
every success with it.
Thank
Over,
you.
over to you,
That's
David.
Me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
No, I was just going to say to Rita, in the Haredi world, increasingly they do go into the army these days, but slowly. There are parade units, and it's quite a few do.
Oh, nice to hear.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think quite a lot actually, because the chief rabbi of Israel said that they were worried at one time that they'd get influenced by the non-religious groups who mainly were in the army. But
One of their problems is having a female commander of a unit that they serve in.
So I was going to build to all of that, because what we were saying was that what lies at the heart of this whole thing is, number one, that there's an appreciation for the important role that a rabbi plays, and number two, there's an important appreciation for the spiritual importance of studying Torah. And after the Holocaust, there was a big push to make sure that the Torah world, which had been so decimated and destroyed in the Holocaust, was able to be rebuilt. So there was a very heavy investment in putting people back into learning environments so that the Torah world could be rebuilt once again. And that is why over the last 70 years or whatever, there has been such a big push for a kollel system and for a yeshiva system. Come sit with Daddy. Come to everyone else. Stay away from Dusty, and Dusty is going to come and finish off lunch alone with me. Okay. So there was such a strong push to ensure that there was a strong kollel system and such a strong yeshiva system, because it was so important to rebuild the Torah world, and that had to that had to come before any other consideration. So even though there was a need to build a strong Israeli defense force, that could not override the importance of maintaining, sustaining, and rebuilding the Torah world. So there's been this delicate balance over the last 7 decades or whatever it is, in order to ensure that the Torah world could be rebuilt. And now, as David was mentioning and Martin was mentioning, that is now starting to change a little bit as they start to find solutions that allow people to maintain their identity, their religious identity, while at the same time being able to serve in the IDF. So that has meant the development of units that are exclusively made for people in those situations. It's meant ensuring a higher provision of kashrut. It's meant an ease of regulations when it comes to having to violate Shabbos or whatever it might be. It's meant the creation of new roles and jobs, so that there are other things for them to do that can be counted as serving in the army, but might not be frontline service. So there's been all these different things that have emerged over the years to be able to accommodate people from that lifestyle that up until recently may not have wanted to dip into the world of the
Excuse me,
IVF.
Rabbi Nick, I have to leave. I'm really sorry.
So do
Thank you very
I.
much.
So do I. I'm going to
Okay.
end it there. We're going to end the recording on what's it called? On Facebook and YouTube. So that's all we've got time for. We wish you all a wonderful, meaningful day. Shabbat Shalom for when it comes, and come join us on Zoom for the after party.